We can always learn from wise people who have done things we might want to do and are willing to share their insights and wisdom. You could say we do that here each week, but rarely have I anticipated a conversation as much as this one. Buckle in for a different kind of conversation, but one that might make all the difference for you. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could join us in the future for live episodes on your favorite social media channel, where we stream them regularly. You can get information about when those lives are happening and figure out how to join us by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. You can just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to get all of that info. And while most of our episodes are first live streamed on a variety of social media platforms, this episode was recorded as a part of our annual Virtual LeaderCon event. You can learn more about that event and sign up for announcements for next year so you can be in the know and on the list for next year's free to attend event at virtualleadercon.com. Welcome back, everybody. So glad that you're back with us. For some of you, you had lunch. If you're in Europe, I don't know, you had a beverage. I don't know what you did. But whatever, you had 30 minutes to leave and do something else and refresh yourself and maybe reflect a little bit on the morning or our first sessions, morning for Kevin. So glad that you're back. And if you were with us first thing this morning, just in the chat real quick, just for fun. If you were here first thing this morning and heard me say that we're going to talk about macaroni and cheese, just say yes in the chat. I just want to know in the chat if anyone remembers that. Like, how do you forget that? But see, that also tells me how long the delay is, Erin. See, look at all the yeses. They're like, what
Amazing.
in the actual heck? I am going to
love it.
introduce you to Erin Wade here in just a second. And this is the second time during VLC that a session will also eventually be on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. So for those of you that are listening to the podcast later, we're so glad you're here. You're getting to sit inside or be inside of our Virtual LeaderCon event, which happens once a year, which you can learn more about at virtualleadercon.com. But for all of you that are here with us live, so glad you're here. Here's the backstory as to why this is going to be here on VLC and also on the podcast, because Erin and I were going to do this and we had a little bit of a miscommunication. And so she showed up at the time we were going to start or like a minute or whatever after, and I had already gone live and said, well, I guess my guest isn't here. We'll do this again later. So we had the chance to chat then about her new book, which doesn't come out, everybody, till next Tuesday, the whatever day that will be, like the 24th of September. Is that right? Do I have my math right there?
Yeah. Yep. So just a few days.
And so, everybody, I have a copy of this book. It's what's called an Advanced Readers Edition, an ARC. And get this, Erin doesn't even have one of these.
It's true.
And I've already read it.
It's true.
And so guess what? I'm going to give it away at the end of today's session. My copy is going away with all my notes in it, or my stickies and all that stuff. Someone's going to get it. And the reason this is the mac and cheese session, it's because Erin Wade is the mac and cheese millionaire, if you can see it by reading the book backwards. Erin Wade is a best-selling author, chef, entrepreneur. She opened a wildly popular restaurant called Homeroom, which has been covered everywhere from the Cooking Channel to the Wall Street Journal. And they serve mac and cheese. Just say it. She authored the best-selling The Mac and Cheese Cookbook, as well as the viral op-ed in the Washington Post, which we'll get to, that was named one of the publication's best of the year. Her work on business culture has been covered in Forbes and the New York Times, and she was named one of 35 world-changing women by Conscious Company magazine. She has a degree in public policy from Princeton, a law degree from UC Berkeley. She lives in the Bay Area with her family and an array of surfboards. So for all of you that were here earlier, I am not the only person with a strange collecting hobby. Erin, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and thanks everyone for coming today.
All right. So yes, we're going to talk about mac and cheese, but we're going to talk about a lot more. So this book, everybody, is one of the most entertaining books I've read this year. And it reads like fiction, and it's just a delight to read. And there's all sorts of wonderful nuggets in it as well. So tell us about the journey. Like, the bio says a little bit about who you are, and where you came from, but like, how do we end up doing this stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess a little bit of a overview is, I had been a very unhappy corporate lawyer with a crazy idea of opening a mac and cheese restaurant. But I think, what the book is really about, just as much as sort of an entrepreneurial, journey from, what it's like to start something. More than anything, I really just had not enjoyed working, which just felt really sad to me. I had not enjoyed workplaces that I'd been in. So I wanted to create a place that I would find a lot of joy coming to work. And I really wanted other people to feel that way as well. So the book is really about sort of this, decade-long personal odyssey to be like, how do you create an amazing place to come to work that means something to people? And through like a lot of trial and error and, as you said, funny stories. Like I've never quite understood why the business genre is so dry, because frankly, some of the things we do and some of the things that happen are sort of ridiculous or funny. And so, what are the lessons I learned along the way, and how can other people implement it in their own career, their own life, their own company? And that was really the goal, is to magnify the impact of all these really unique things that we developed over a decade.
There are some amazing stories. We'll probably get to a few of them before we're done. So law, mac and cheese, right? In the book, you tell us the story about how you get there. Well, let's just start here. Why mac and cheese?
So
it's not just why restaurant, right? It's why mac and cheese.
Well, so I was coming home one night working as a very disgruntled corporate attorney. It was raining. I was just in a bad mood, and I was craving a bowl of mac and cheese. And I live in Oakland, California, which is a major urban center. And I realized there was no restaurant I could go to that had a really delicious version, which felt crazy to me. So I whipped out my dad's recipe. I got all the ingredients. I made it. And as I was eating it, I thought to myself, wow, like, why is there no mac and cheese restaurant? There's pizza restaurants, there's burger restaurants. Like, why is there no place I could go tonight for mac and cheese? And I thought, this restaurant should exist and I should be the person to start it. And then thankfully, I was fired a few months later, and that idea was sort of percolating in my head, and I decided to sort of go forth and make it happen.
And I think you say in the book, if I remember right, that your dad's mac and cheese is one of the very best, right? This is what sort
of. It is I don't know if one of. I think it is truly is the best I've ever had.
And that's what you replicated when you started, right?
Totally. And, you just do it differently, right? When that is the thing you're doing, like mac and cheese up to that point, I'd only ever seen it relegated to like side dish status, where it sits in a pot and, maybe someone scoops it out and it's been sitting there for a long time. Maybe it's grainy, maybe it's soggy, so we're really committed to making each one to order, and with a 1/4 pound of cheese and making it fresh and with real ingredients and having that just really be the star. And so, that's sort of the story behind the food. But to be honest, there was also, it's like a less glamorous story, but a real like business reason for mac and cheese, which is I had also, before I ever became a lawyer, I'd actually worked in fine dining restaurants, and it was very dead end, and I didn't see a future there, which is sort of why I detoured into law. And also I felt so compelled to build a great restaurant company, because I felt like I wanted to give other people the future that I had not sort of seen for myself in the industry. But, practically speaking, I just thought, this is a great food that I could teach like everyday people to make it the best that you'd ever had. And I thought that was going to be really critical to it being successful, is not having to have a chef in the kitchen to make it incredible, but just everyday people could learn how to make it and have it still be the best mac and cheese you've ever eaten.
And you do talk early in the book about working in those fine dining establishments, and you do talk about the frustration there. But you didn't just say, like, there's a lot of people in the world, you've heard these stories more often than me, that say, I want to start a restaurant. But you had done your homework. You'd worked in restaurants. You'd figured out what worked and a lot of what didn't work. Then you had Dad's mac and cheese. So you had this, you saw a business opportunity, but when you searched I'm just imagining you doing a web search in Oakland for mac and cheese and not finding it, right? So like if we wanted to start from a basic business perspective, you had prepared yourself, even though, you think public policy and a law degree doesn't necessarily prepare me for that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely some advice that I give people. I always speak to people sort of at different phases in their career or their entrepreneurial journey. And I do think restaurant is like a very sexy thing that people are like, oh my God, I want to do it. And I always think if you're thinking of making the leap into something, the best thing to do is just to go work in it for free for someone else for a period of time. Because there's nothing like actually doing the job that you think you might want to have. And I can tell you that restaurants are like vastly less glamorous than people, think they might be. So yeah, I think, as much as it seems like this huge leap from law to restaurants, it really, for me, it was more of a homecoming. Like I had really tried to find my way there for a while, couldn't, and realized if I wanted to have a good job in the industry, I was basically going to have to make it for myself. But I did so being pretty educated about, what it meant to work for someone else. And really, I used those tools and lessons to also like build Homeroom into being successful. Like I had worked in all these fine dining restaurants, and I thought to myself, there's no reason that a casual restaurant can't have fabulous, like world-class design and service. Those things do not cost more money, but create tremendous additional value. And so whenever people, like many, many people have tried to replicate Homeroom's success, like our financials are in the top, 1% of restaurants. And so far as I know, all the competitors don't do remotely as well. And I mean, in part, it's all the things we do with our people, which I write about in the book, but it also, frankly, is creating this like world-class experience that is inexpensive because it doesn't cost more, but you need to care more to create it.
Love that. So I think we're inching toward my next question, which is what would you say, Erin, is your leadership philosophy?
So I would say I really focus on three things. It is like connection, collaboration, and collective success. And I could talk through all of them and what that actually means. Those sound like they could just like be buzzwords, but they actually mean like very tangible things to me, which is, I really think of, building a business, just creating a great team that's just trying to play a game. And so to really be great at that, you need to be connected, you need to have systems to collaborate, and you need to care about the success of something bigger than yourself. So those are really the three things I sort of outline in the book and talk about, and and give some specific tools that I think also really help achieve that versus just talk about it.
You write in the book, I'm not going to say, hey, what did you say on page 105? I am going to say, I couldn't have articulated it at the time, but I have come to understand that part of the secret sauce of building a great organization is a dedication to connection at all levels. And so we can talk more about that. We can talk about the 3 C's, and we will a little bit more before we're done. But now I need to ask you a really serious question. You told us in the book, or you told me in the book when I read the book, that you faked playing the violin for an entire school year.
Yeah.
How does this happen, and why did you do it?
So yeah, I have this chapter that's basically the concept is sort of like fake it till you make it. And so the book is structured such that every chapter begins with a theme that's really rooted in like a childhood memory, and usually sort of a ridiculous story. And that play out through the lens of the restaurant, through the journey of the restaurant. So in this case, it was, I attended this large public school and I missed the first few lessons of the violin. And so I show up to this big group class and I'm too embarrassed to tell anyone I don't know what I'm doing. And so I just start air playing the violin, just like not touching the bow at the strings. And no one notices the whole year. And then it comes time to do these like end of the year evaluations. And I'm just sweating. I'm so stressed. I'm like, I'm going to be found out as the fraud that I am. Like, I don't know what I'm going to tell my parents. but they tested people in groups of 5, and I had gotten so adept at playing like the air violin that I actually was invited to join the orchestra the following year. So, you know, my parents thought I was like this phenom, like they've never seen me practice, and yet I'm like, you know, being promoted to the orchestra. And anyway, yeah, I mean, and the you know, sort of connection to I guess like my journey with Homeroom and restaurants is, I mean, I don't suggest faking it till you make it in that regard, but just like, you know, I got to join orchestra just by virtue of showing up and playing the air violin, you know, and I did not know what I was doing. But I do think that is how I got to learn with restaurants. I never went to culinary school. I just showed up and I didn't know what I was doing, and I worked for people for free. And I did eventually learn, unlike the violin. And it
because
opened.
You showed up and you actually worked. Right.
Yes, I showed up and I actually worked, and I did stuff. But I think we're often really afraid to just show up and look stupid, or we are like waiting for, you know, oh, I have to apply for this program, or I need to get a degree, or like I think we just like overinvest very early before we know if something's like actually going to be a good fit. And so, you know, my advice was like, it's okay to just be the dumbest person in the room for a while. Like you can, you know, get a great education that way. I think a better I mean, I'm very educated. I went to Princeton. I have a law degree. I had nothing against traditional education, but I think some of the best lessons I've learned have been by just really putting myself out there and trying something, you know, and seeing how it feels.
I love that. I did read the book several weeks ago because in preparation for when we were going to have our first conversation, and one of the notes that I made that I'm going to bring back to the fore, and I haven't had the chance to go back and find all of my reasons why, but I do remember having this thought when I read it, that it seems to me so I'm going to say this, it's positive feedback, and then you can respond to it however you'd wish, right? Someone wants to be a chef. Phoebe wants to be a chef too.
Nice.
It seems to me, here's what I wrote. It seems to me that one of your great strengths is reflecting and listening to yourself. Number one, do you agree? And if you agree, what advice would you give to us about that?
That's a great question. I'm gonna like write that on a piece of paper and like stick it on my wall or something. As like a North Star. I think that's what I'd like to do. I think, you know, I don't always do it. And those are some of the bigger mistakes I've made in my life, or when I haven't listened to myself and I've listened to, you know, sort of other people's voices or opinions. But yeah, I do think that that's the thing that I find sort of recentering. Advice I'd have on how to do it. I mean, I do talk in the book. I do think other people's voices, sort of society's voices, are very loud. I mean, I talk about that as the reason I had become a lawyer. I was looking for like affirmation, something that was going to look impressive. But I think more than anything, I think we're not taught, you know, what happens in your career if there's not a clear path, right? You know, school is very much set up where someone gives you a way to be successful. You send it back to them, and then you get a good grade, and
there's a game to play. And if you figure out how to play the game, right?
Totally. But I think, you know, for most of us, like life is not like that. It's not linear, you know, and a career is certainly not linear like that. Most people's, I think, if it's going to be dynamic and successful and fulfilling, right? And so I think it can get really tempting to like not listen to yourself and just follow what feels comfortable, because it's just too scary and we haven't been trained to, you know, to sit in discomfort of experimenting or failing. And so, yeah, I do think I try to consistently come back to that. And the times I have come back to it have not only been personally meaningful, they've been really financially successful for me too. Because I think it's so rare for people to truly follow passion that when you do, I think it's infectious. Like people want to join you on that journey. They want to buy whatever you're selling that you're passionate about. Like, I think passion is infectious. And so it's not just a key to, like personal fulfillment, it's a key to financial success. And I guess lastly, what I'd say in terms of ways that I actually tangibly do that, I think it's finding something that you do that is just for you, that really puts you in touch with yourself on a consistent basis. So for me, it's surfing. I find that very meditative. For other people, it could be whatever. It could be, you know, a sport. It could be, a hobby. But I think finding something that is really just for you, that is reflective, is an important practice to have.
You know, one of my observations and one of my beliefs in life is that, you know, in every negative thing, there are positive things to find. And certainly the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic had all sorts of negative things associated with it, for
Yeah.
sure. But I think and I think there are also many positive things that came from and happened as a result of the pandemic. And one of them, I think, is that many people did that. Many people took that advice before you just gave
Mm-hmm.
it, and they they found that, and they went back to that. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think those. So just in the chat, yes or no? Yes, if you reconnected with a hobby, found a hobby, did something that helped to create what Erin's saying for you that you did sort of during the pandemic when you didn't have anything else to do, right? I just be curious. I bet you're going to find a bunch of yeses over there. And so my hope then is that people continue to do that, right? And you tell in the book about when you started surfing and how you continue to surf, etc. Right? So look
Yeah,
at all,
and and
look at all
something
those
that
guys.
I like encourage people to do, I don't know if this is helpful, and not all of us have like the benefit of being able to do this or like being our own boss, but I actually used to be quite shy about it. Like when I got really into surfing, I'd frankly lie to my team about like where I was going, because I would just be off grid. I'd be like, I have to take a kid to a doctor's appointment or whatever, because I felt like too
Why do your
embarrassed to be
kids
like,
have so
I'm
many doctor's appointments, Erin?
um because I felt like I should be available for my work meetings, or I should, I didn't know how to tell people I was surfing. And eventually I decided to just tell the truth and say, hey, I make time for this every week, and it's important time, and even if something big is blowing up at work, I'm actually not going to schedule over it. And I want you to do the same, because I think this makes us better people, better at our jobs. And I realized that like I was trying to create this utopian workplace that I'd want people to make those kind of decisions, but that I wasn't really modeling that kind of decisions myself, And so yeah, I think making that time is like just critical to your success. So if you work for someone who will give that kind of space to you, or if you're a leader who can, create that, I think it's so important.
There's a question that's come in from Stacy it's not that directly, but it's connected to what you just said there. I'm just going to
Mm-hmm.
put it up on the screen and I'll read it, and then I'll just
Sure.
let you respond to whatever you want. There's a certain amount of privilege required to show up and work for free. You can't do that if you don't have the ability. Then you also have to be able to eat, have a place to live, etc. What advice do you have
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have that ability to just show up and work for free?
Sure. I mean, I think that is correct. There just is a certain amount of privilege. I think the reason I recommend it is because it still takes less privilege than paying for a very expensive degree, which I know even more people don't do. And I certainly also have worked with a lot of folks that get a degree without that experience. And then they're like, oh, shoot, I don't like this. And then they have debt for the rest of their lives. So I think compared to a degree, it's a low cost way to get some experience, because it does take your time, but at least it doesn't also take your money. Um, but I think, it's eking out whatever time you can have. I don't write about it in the book, but I did, also, I tried starting out really small, inexpensive businesses in my free time to see if I'd like it. Like I had started a, small, this is when I was working as a lawyer. So like, trust me, I like really didn't have time, but I do this occasionally. I just tried launching like a wedding baking business, because those would be just fixed events that I could sort of plan for and just be like, oh, this experience will basically pay me to see if I like this. Right. Um, and I did, bake treats for a few weddings, and that did take some time, but I did get paid for it. And I learned, oh, I don't want to do this, but I'm certainly grateful that I tried. So yeah, I think sometimes it means getting creative. And I also think sometimes for, some folks, it's just also not realistic. Maybe you're in a place or a moment in your life that it's not the time to try new stuff. It's the time to like get your kids through school and pay your bills and, put your head down. And I think, I hope we all get to write different chapters of our lives, and they're not all going to look the same, and they're all going to have different opportunities that, and space that we can make.
So the next question comes from one of my co-authors, who presumes that you're going to have context for this, but I'll let you decide if you do. I would not. What does the bear get right and wrong about the restaurant business, and do you like it, or does it make you crazy?
Well, Wayne, I love that show. I'm obsessed with The Bear, just like everyone else. So I'm so glad that you asked. I mean, honestly, that show is so accurate that, like, when I first turned it on, the frenetic pace was so accurate. Like, gave me like PTSD from my days of working in restaurants where I was like, this is a little too, like, close to reality. So honestly, I think it's an exceptionally well done show, and very, very true to life.
See, there you go. Um, uh, you've said several things here. You talked about wanting to create this wonderful place to work, and that was one of the things that drove you. You've talked a lot about culture without using that word. It's another C word, I suppose. But what thoughts do you have about our role as leaders in creating culture, and what were maybe a couple of key things you were trying to create at Homeroom?
Yeah, so I'd say, like, sort of the core, like, sort of story behind the journey is that I thought, I understood that a lot of workplaces, why I didn't like them, is they're based on a lot of outdated principles, I thought, of how to do something, which were very controlling. And I thought, like, okay, I really want to create things that give people, like, systems that create more autonomy, more trust, more pride in what you're doing, which I think comes from autonomy and trust, and not being feeling controlled. But the truth is, I didn't know how to do that. And an analogy that I use in the book that I think is a little helpful is, I mean, I started from one dystopia, which was working for other people that had been quite controlling, quite toxic. But then I really created my own dystopia at first by giving people, like, way too much freedom and a complete lack of guidance. And it turns out, like, the opposite of, command and control is, like, no good either, And so I started to realize that actually my key as a leader, I compare it to, are you handing someone a blank sheet of paper, a paint by number, or a coloring book? And what I mean by that is, a paint by number is going to look the same no matter who does it, right? It's the same colors in the same place, the same picture. A piece of paper, people are going to draw all sorts of different things. It's always going to look really different. But a coloring book, you have the same outline, but everyone's going to use different colors. So you're going to see the same picture, but it's going to come to life in different ways. And I think time and again, what I learned is, like, my goal as a leader is to create the coloring book. What is the right structure within which I'm giving people freedom to express themselves? And I think I would ask myself that question time again, and I can give you a lot of examples of how that kind of stuff played out.
You just use two words in that whole story, and people are writing down blank page, color, white sheet of paper, coloring book. But you said at the very start of that, when I asked about culture, the first word you said was systems, and the last word you said was structure. And I think that's what's often missing, right? Like,
yes, totally.
I want people to be trustworthy. I want to trust them.
Yeah.
But we as leaders have to put stuff with that. We have to put stuff around that. In the book, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you use the word boundaries, or at least that's one of the words that I'm remembering connected. Like, you put some guardrails and some boundaries, some systems around some of these things, because when you just said people do whatever you want, like, that didn't work. Like you said, that didn't work. What else do you want to say? You said yes when I said systems. What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just my experience is that when people talk about culture, it's this very woo concept. It doesn't mean a lot. And I think without systems and structures that really help, like, codify it, teach it, promote for it, I think it's the systems and structure that make those concepts really come to life, So, I mean, this is a silly example, but I think it'll, resonate with people because we've all eaten in restaurants. But, for example, when we were coming up with our service standards, like, lots of restaurants have scripts, right? You go to McDonald's, they're going to ask, do you want fries with that, right? That, like, there's something that every single person is going to say. It's the equivalent of the paint by number, right? It's the same no matter who's working, or it's intended to be. For a while at Homeroom, we tried the blank page, and I can tell you it was a disaster. People, like, couldn't even figure out who worked there because no one was, like, wearing the same stuff. Like, it was not a professional environment, right? Because there was no standards. So eventually we did is, and to this point about like connecting and collaborating with people, we had a lot of systems to get feedback from our staff. And so as I was working on creating these service standards, took a page from the playbook of one of our best servers. I was like, hey, how do you create this? You're exceptional at your job. Like, what do you use? And he explained that he gave himself this challenge. It was like, he called it like the Stokeout rule. And he knew that he could provide like good service to everyone, every day, but we serve, thousands and thousands of people a week. So he would really focus on, for every hour of his shift, he's there for 5 hours, he would try to stoke out one table so that it would be the best experience that they had had in a restaurant, like all year, maybe their whole life, and he followed up on it. I mean, he did just like wild and crazy stuff for folks. And I realized, oh, that is perfect. That is, that's the coloring book. So we started articulating this Stokeout rule. And so we would tell people who are servers, we're like, hey, we're going to give you complete autonomy and freedom. You're welcome to give away free food. You're welcome to, whatever way you want to do this, you can. But we expect for you to stoke out 5 tables a shift. So make it that this is the most memorable experience of their dining life, and people are so creative, their coloring books really did all look so different. Some people would like sing to people, they'd put together like little skits. They'd like draw in condiments on their mac and cheese, little messages to them, make them artwork. I mean, it's just like, people are so creative, but I think that ability to feel trusted, and to have a challenge and to be expected to like live, our mission was to be the best part of people's day. They absolutely were, but I wasn't telling them, here's how to be the best part of someone's day. They got to decide for themselves. And I think that's the fun, the creativity, the joy, like that's what makes something worth doing.
I love that. I need to make a administrative comment, everyone. It appears to those on our team anyway, that chat message, oh, no, maybe they come. There we go. So we were worried that the chat wasn't working, but it appears it is. Okay, cool. Awesome. Glad that it's working. We've had a little bit of problems with our loving crowdcast today. I just want to make sure we're cool. So some chats might have gotten lost, but it appears we're back, and it makes me happy. So there we go. So I want, I mentioned in the opening that you wrote an article that was in the Washington Post. It was one of the best of the year. And it ended up talking about something called the color code. And so I'd like you to, if you would could you tell us that story? Because it leads, the story is really fascinating and I think is really helpful, especially since our next section is going to be about inclusive leadership, which makes it even maybe more meaningful. Tell us that story and then give us where you landed, because I think it's really, really useful.
Sure. So, I'm really proud that we had a lot of systems for getting staff involved in the restaurant. And, so I thought I was like living my dream. And this was around, this is, a while, like the restaurant had been open maybe 6 or 7 years at this point. And one day I get emails from a bunch of, female staff members saying they need to speak to me. And I have no idea what it's about, but as they come forward, it turns out that one woman had gotten like quite really sexually harassed. It was a host, someone had actually stuck their hand up her shirt. It was pretty egregious. And what happened is all this female servers started getting together and realizing they all had stories, not maybe that bad, but like that, and that it was a problem that needed to be addressed. And so we do have a lot of systems for like bringing problems to the front, but I think something I'm also really proud of is we also have systems for everyone solving them. Like you can't just, it's not like, okay, here's the problem, now leaders go fix it for me. That's a very paternal working relationship, but very much how many companies are structured. So we set up a meeting for anyone who wanted to attend to just talk about this problem and start brainstorming solutions to it. And it's a pretty big problem. Like 1 in 10 Americans works in restaurants. 70% reports experiencing some form of harassment. That's a huge number of people. So, this is a pretty entrenched problem in the industry, but we got together and we started experimenting with some different things. And we ended up coming up with this solution that was incredibly effective. And I'll tell you how it works. But I ended up writing a viral piece in the Washington Post about it. I ended up getting invited to speak in front of the United States EEOC. They did a task force on harassment. They adopted it as a best practice. But, I'm so proud of it because I think, if other organizations can use a lot of the tools in the book, like I really do wonder, like what kind of solutions could we come up with if we had a truly engaged workforce? Because this, we're just a small restaurant and came up with a system that's now used truly in restaurants all around the globe and affects, has improved the lives of like millions of people. So I think similar solutions are like hiding in plain sight in other places if only we engage people. But I'm happy to tell folks what, yeah.
Sure. What she did was she asked them to help solve the problem. It's not even hard. We just have to do it. Fair?
It's true. But, I think what we meant, you have to ask, you have to create the conditions where people, that's part of your culture, right? So it has to, again, there has to be expectations and, rules, but yeah, I think also a lot of leaders have to be willing to like share power, which not everyone wants to do. Like I found that a very joyful exercise. So for others that might feel that way too, but some people really like thinking that they know all the answers. So it's tough, but yeah, I think the system is worth sharing because it's very simple, but very effective. And I do think people can leverage this into all sorts of workplaces. But basically what we did is came up with this color-coded system, yellow, orange, and red. And a yellow is nothing more than just a bad vibe. And if it happened, a staff member would report it to a manager. And it was their choice what would happen. They could either just report it or the manager could take over the table. An orange would be, a creepy vibe plus an ambiguous comment. So maybe something like, I like your shirt. Depending on who's saying it, if it's like a, adorable little kid, you won't feel threatened. But if it's someone who's been like leering at you, you might feel like, oh gosh, like what's about to happen here, And in that case, you would just say, hey, I've got an orange at, table 2, and the manager's required to take it over, just no questions asked. And then a red is, like sexually explicit language or touching. So like you look sexy in that shirt or touching someone. In that case, you just report the red and the manager's required to ask the person to leave. So what's really cool about it is it's very quick and effective. You're not sitting there like telling stories on the, like in a busy place. People don't know it's being used on them. So, I think it's very like pro customer as well. But it was actually amazingly effective at curbing the worst forms of harassment, which honestly came as a surprise to us. Because very few people just walk into a restaurant and stick their hand up someone's shirt. What they do is they sort of start checking them out, and then they use like, low-level inappropriate comments and see how they're tolerated, and then they keep escalating their behavior. And so because we would change these power dynamics at a really low level, we just actually pretty much stopped seeing these like red incidents happen. They became very, very rare. So, it is really, it's easy to use, it's simple, it's really effective. And, like I said, I think it's really made a difference. And I think even if you don't have a customer facing business, I think even just having the language of those colors also even just helped us internally be able to talk about harassment because, like I did have staff members come to me and be like, I feel like this is maybe an orange situation that I've got going on. And, it just gives you, I think, a language and a structure to talk about the things that happen that make us uncomfortable and, some ideas for how to deal with it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. It's one of the many things you'll get when you get your copy of this book next week when it comes out, the Mac and Cheese Millionaire. One of you is going to get it when this episode is over. Adrian's going to give me some names, and one of you is going to get this book. Adrian, you can pick who's going to get it. Give it to me in the Slack, and we'll do that in a few minutes. We got a little time left. So, but for all of you that are watching this, listen to this on the podcast, go get your copy of this book. Do yourself a favor. You're going to enjoy it, and you're going to learn an immense amount, just like I think that you will have gotten from this conversation. So, I want to know if there's anything you thought I would ask or you wish I would have asked that I haven't.
Well, I think there is a topic in the book that I think is really effective as like a workplace tool, but also as a life tool that has been really helpful for me. So I'd love to chat about the idea of like restorative discipline that we talk about in the book.
Yep, go ahead.
So, like I said, a lot of the concepts in the book is really just like, how do you create a place that's filled with, like meaning, purpose, connection, collective success, right? And I think one of the biggest problems that we all have, I don't care if you're a parent, you're an executive, you're an owner of a business, is like, what do you do when people screw up, right? What do you do when they make mistakes, and how do we handle it? And I thought that the systems that existed were just really, again, like antiquated. Usually we just punish people, which I don't know about you, but I've not found it to be effective in plenty of contexts. It's not that great it hasn't been that helpful with my kids, not very helpful at work. It was not curbing people's bad behavior. And so I actually drew from some experience from my time as an attorney. And we started playing around with this concept of restorative justice, but in discipline at work. And so like traditional justice is literally someone does something wrong, we punish them, right? We send them to prison, whatever it might be. It's the same way most workplaces work. Like if someone's late to work, you'd probably write them up or dock them a shift or whatever, right? You punish them. The idea behind restorative justice is you want to actually right the wrong to the extent possible. You want to try to make it better. And so what we would do is, instead of punishing people, you just engage in it's like a 3-part conversation. And the first is just what happened. So like, let's say the person's late. They're just like, I'm late. And the second question is, who do you think was impacted? And a lot of times people don't get that far, right? Like and in the case of someone being late, in restaurants, it means that like other people are having to do your work for you because we're still serving customers, right? It means those customers are probably getting crappier service because there was like one less person there to cook or to help them. And now the manager is wasting their time talking to you, right? So there's like multiple layers of impact that are negative. And so, walking through those is really helpful. And then the most important is, what are you going to do to make it right? I think, again, to my point about like giving people space to use their autonomy and their creativity, that coloring book concept, like people would come up with all sorts of different ways to make it right. Sometimes they would, help with pick up other people's side work or pick up other shifts that they need covered because they had, realized they had sort of wronged their fellow coworkers. They would write themselves up to take the, burden off the manager of like having to document this for HR purposes. They would go up to the customer and personally apologize, be like, hey, your food might have taken longer tonight. It happened because I was late. Here's a free piece of cake on us. I mean, I think those are really special moments that never would have existed. And I think, that person really thinks twice before they do that again in a way that just, having written them up and punished them just never would have accomplished. So I think there's just so many creative solutions to like really giving people more autonomy, freedom, connection that we're just really starting to explore,
Awesome. So one of the things I ask almost all of my guests, I think really all of them on the podcast, is this, and it's the only thing you knew I was going to ask you, and that is, what are you reading these days?
I have to say I'm an obsessive reader of both The New Yorker and The Economist. I also love books, but I think those two things sort of keep me in touch with, what's happening in the world, what's happening in business, and then like what's just some great writing from some different authors about all sorts of random topics. So that's probably my favorite reading right now.
The Economist and The New Yorker. Now,
yeah.
I can't end this without a couple of other mac and cheese things. So I know
yes,
we should all go buy the mac and cheese cookbook. I got that. What's one tip to help us make our mac and cheese better?
Oh, I mean, other than buy my cookbook, but
well, exactly. I started there. I got you. We should all be doing that. I'm with you.
So I would say, here's my 2 pieces of advice. If you're making like, the boxed kind at home, add real cheese to it in addition to the powder. That's my one tip for elevating your box mac and cheese game. But if you want to make like the real deal, it's just like ingredients you can pronounce. It doesn't take a lot of time and effort. Seriously, it takes just about as long to make homemade mac and cheese as it does to make the box stuff. So I would say like make the real thing, try it. It's fun. And it is just like 10,000 times more delicious.
I have to. I told myself I wasn't going to do it, but I'm going to do it because I read this to members of my team and to my wife. This is the introduction. It's the beginning of the book, everybody. It's reading time. I am the world's leading expert on macaroni and cheese, a bold claim, I realize, but it's the God's honest truth. I have personally cooked more than 10,000 mac and cheese dishes. I have grated over 1 metric ton of cheese, boiled thousands of pounds of pasta, and whisked. I won't read the rest. You know how the rest of it goes. I'll leave that out of the show. But it is like, it's amazing. A metric ton, whatever. So here we go. I don't know if you know this, but this company made a mac and cheese ice cream. Are you familiar with the mac and cheese ice cream?
I am. It has received a ton of press. I do think some things are better left unmade, but kudos to them for their creativity.
Well, we have an internal Kevin Eikenberry group story about that. Adrienne Knox on our team. If those of you who were here earlier saw her, she'll be here at the end. She's in there as well. We read about it. We bought it for her. We made sure that she tested it on a Zoom so we could all see her and her kids eat. So,
and what did she say? What did she say? I mean, what was her expert opinion?
So Adrienne, you can go ahead and you can put it in the chat over there. I will say it because I know, Erin, you're not reading the chat. I'll say what she says. Yes, and one of the members of our team did the mac and cheese gummies as well. And Adrienne's comment is, don't knock it until you try it. But I will say that her face at the start wasn't that awesome. She said it wasn't too bad. Okay. Where can people learn more about the book? Anything else? Where do you want to point people before we start to wrap this up? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, you can buy the Mac and Cheese Millionaire anywhere you like to buy books. It'll also be out in a few weeks in audio format. But yeah, if you want to follow my work in any way, you can check out my website at erinwade.co, or get in touch with me at the Erin Wade on social media.
The Erin Wade on social media. I love that. So Erin, I promised I was going to give away some books. So I'm assuming that Adrienne, the resident mac and cheese person, has given me stuff over here. Yes, I've got that. Thank you, Lisa. I saw that. So let's see. She's got 3 names for me. Oh, by the way, Adrienne says we'll have to agree to disagree on the box versus homemade. Just saying. So here's the thing. Nick Galley is going to get this copy of this book. And Carol, so they're going to put in there what needs to happen for you to make sure that we get you your books. And for Carol Wilson and Alexandria Tackett, you're going to get copies of my book. I mean, I can't see if you can see it right now. There we go. Remarkable Leadership. So those are the winners. Those are the winners for this session. And Nick, like I said, you're getting this book. It's the one that I marked up. It's also the one that Erin doesn't even have a copy of yet. So there you go. By the time you get it, it'll be out because it won't leave here till Monday or Tuesday. So that's fine. Erin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And really appreciate everyone for attending and for all the thoughtful comments on the side.
And for all of you that are watching / listening to this later on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, I always ask you a question, and I'm not going to end without asking that question. And that is, now what? What action will you take as a result of this? Obviously, Erin and I, we both hope that you go buy a copy of the book. But beyond that, what idea did Erin share that you found to be interesting or inspiring or informative that you're going to take action on? Because if you don't take action, sort of what was the point? And so my hope for you, having listened to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, or for having been here at Virtual LeaderCon, those of you on LeaderCon have already heard me say this today, like the only thing that matters is taking action. And so I hope that you will take action on what you got today. Erin, thank you for coming back and joining me. It was such a pleasure. I knew this was going to be fun, and I was not disappointed.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been great.
All right. So everybody, those of you on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, we'll be back next week with another episode. You know that. Tell someone to come join us. Encourage them to listen to this one. For all of you on Virtual LeaderCon, we'll leave here, and I'll see you on the other side in a minute or so. Thanks, everybody.